Hello, I'm Max Pleasure. We are in the thick of the holiday season, meaning everyone is talking about Carol, the iconic lesbian movie from 2015 starring Cate Blanchett and Rooney. Most people know that the movie is based on a book, The Price of Salt by Patricia Highsmith. The book is famous among queer women and has a really special spot in queer history because it was one of the first popular depiction of successful lesbian love. But a lot of people don't know that the book is based on a real-life event. And that real-life event, unfortunately, ended in tragedy. But we're gonna start at the beginning. It was the winter of 1948. Patricia Highsmith took a temporary job during the Christmas rush as a salesgirl at Bloomingdale's. One day, this gorgeous blonde, statuesque woman with intelligent gray eyes walked up to the doll counter that Pat was working at and ordered a doll for her daughter. Pat was transfixed. She later wrote in her diary that this woman seemed to give off a light, and she felt odd and swimmy in the head, near to fainting, yet at the same time uplifted, as if I had seen a vision. Pat was rocked beyond. This is exactly how the love affair starts in both the book and the movie. But so anyway, Pat filled out the slip for the order with the woman's name, Kathleen, and her address, and completes the transaction. This is where the similarities between real life and fiction end, and honestly, where things get a little creepy. In the movie, Carol famously accidentally forgets her beautiful leather glove on the doll counter, and Therese has the excuse of returning it for reaching out to her again. But in real life, Pat needed no excuse, and neither did the protagonist in the book. I'm pretty sure the whole glove thing doesn't happen in the book. Pat just went downstairs and bought a Christmas card and sent it off to Kathleen. I honestly admire the boldness. Although she didn't sign it with her name, she signed it with her Bloomingdale's employee number. All of our bravery has limits, I suppose. So Pat finished her shift at Bloomingdale's, and in a fever that ended up being a literal honest-to-God fever, immediately went home and wrote the entire plot of what would become The Price of Salt in 2 hours. She says in her diary that it just flowed from her pen. That's not the creepy part yet. Literally the day after Pat finished her first draft of the novel, she decided the best way to celebrate would be to take a little trip to Ridgewood, New Jersey, to visit Kathleen's house, the address for which she had memorized over a year prior. Let me just say this now. Pat was not a good person. That's just the most concise way to put it. She was generally unlikable and difficult to be around. She was nasty, anti-Semitic, racist, misogynistic, stingy, and selfish. She was an alcoholic. She had an eating disorder for her entire life. She had mommy issues like crazy, which probably isn't the best way to put it, but that's what they were. She lived in fear of being outed, and it doesn't seem like it was just being outed. It seems like she was really truly afraid of being her authentic self. Those last few things, of course, don't automatically make anyone a bad person, but they do insinuate that Pat was a woman haunted by a lot of things, and she acted like it. But full disclosure, that is the kind of person that we're talking about. Anyway, Pat took a train from Penn Station, then rode a Ridgewood bus, then walked on a sidewalkless street all the way to Kathleen's street. Why did she do this? It's not really clear. Pat didn't have a delusional fantasy that she was going to live out her fictional novel with this real woman. Pat was very aware that Carol was not real, that Carol was not this woman. But I guess she wanted to at least lay eyes on this woman who inspired the character that Pat fell in love with. She says in one of her diaries, "I'm falling in love with my Carol. I can't wait to get back to my novel. I'll be myself then." It was very personal to her. Pat ended up not even being able to do that. She felt she looked too conspicuous, so refused to get any closer to Kathleen's house, which is probably for the best. Pat did see, however, a blonde woman drive by in an aqua blue, aqua green car. And Pat was like, that could have been her. She wrote in her diary, "My heart leapt, but not very high." So like, I don't know. She may have seen her, she may not have. Either way, it was a pretty anticlimactic stalking trip. I think Pat did try again one other time, but ultimately nothing happened. So if you were thinking that I was going to say something crazy like Pat broke into her home, kidnapped her child, assumed a fake identity, and befriended her, she didn't do any of that. Pat, I guess, reserved those deep, dark fantasies of committing crimes and murder for her novels. If you're familiar with any of her other work, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The Talented Mr. Ripley, Strangers on a Train, Deep Water, The Cry of the Owl, etc. And The Price of Salt, Carol, really stands out from all of Pat's other work, not just because it's a lesbian story, but this is the only Pat Highsmith novel that does not include murder. There is no death in The Price of Salt. And the crazy thing is that it very well could have included death. In fact, it would have been truer to real life if it had. Pat's sudden and electrifying attraction that she felt towards Kathleen had a violent edge to it. Pat actually always likened love and sex to violence and murder. Like I said, she had some stuff going on. Pat wrote in her diary about how she wanted to close her hands tightly around Kathleen's throat. Not even to mention the slightly sadomasochistic and like BDSM, sexy mommy like undertones that the interaction in the store had. And those undertones and the violent way in which Pat experienced sexual attraction are included in the book, very subtly though, but you can definitely spot them if you have an eye for that sort of thing. What I'm trying to get at is the only really present violence in The Price of Salt is like an emotional violence. There's the invasion of privacy. Then there's that imprisonment, that feeling of imprisonment when you know you're being spied on and your perfectly normal actions, you just living your life, is going to have dire consequences. And those dire consequences are like a death in some way. The death of Carol and Therese's relationship, the death of Carol's relationship with her daughter, and the end of life as they both know it. In real life, for Kathleen, the real Carol, imprisonment and death was all too real. Kathleen had been committed to multiple psychiatric institutions throughout her life, and around Halloween of 1950 or 1951, Kathleen committed suicide. This was only like a year after, unbeknownst to her, of course, Pat stalked her house. And biographers, people who have written books about Pat Highsmith, who have, researched Kathleen, have described her as both gregarious and charismatic, but also self-possessed. She was the wife of a wealthy businessman. Kathleen also suffered from alcoholism. It definitely seems like there's some dark mysteries there. Pat didn't know any of this, and she actually never knew. She never found out what became of the inspiration for one of her greatest characters. And honestly, in my opinion, it's a good thing that she didn't know. If she had known, we might have ended up with a very different novel. It's honestly crazy in my opinion. Somehow, this author, who was a dark storm cloud of a woman, who almost exclusively wrote stories where people suffer and die, wrote this novel that was so against her own grain, which doesn't include any death for its two lesbian lovers, based on a real-life event that ends in suffering and death. Pat and Kathleen lived out the ending that so many storytellers of the time, and even of the present, give their lesbian protagonists. And I honestly think it's miraculous that Pat didn't give us that kind of ending. She almost did. The first draft of the book had Carol and Therese not ending up together, but something, I guess, made her change her mind. Maybe it was the relationship that she had with her other Carol inspo. Or maybe it was just because deep down, in Pat's truest, most authentic self, a happy ending was what she wanted. I mean, she didn't get it though. It's really sad. But whatever the reason for Carol's happy ending was, I know a lot of queer women are very grateful for it. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please give me a like. Feel free to share if you would like to do so. Please tag me. All my social handles are on screen. And if you have any questions about the creation of Carol, The Price of Salt, or about Pat Highsmith's life, you can ask me. I probably know the answers and are bursting to talk about it, so definitely leave a comment if that's you. Thanks for watching this video, and I will see you soon. I have a very big life update that I will share soon. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see that or more. I talk about a lot of gay stuff. Yeah, all right.